Supreme Court takes up conversion bans on some of this therapy, making it unconstitutional. Canada removes religious exemptions from hate speech laws, and 54 Christians were killed on Palm Sunday, but the mainstream media is not talking about it. We also are on the edge of a world war. Wow, we got a lot to talk about on this week's Weekly Briefing. Welcome to Cutting Edge Faith. I'm Ryan Howard. This podcast is here to help you understand the times, stand for truth, and grow in your faith. And this, of course, is the Weekly Briefing. And we took a break, but now we are back. And we're going to go through the headlines from the previous week quickly, the things that you need to know. This isn't necessarily a news show. It's really just let's talk about what's going on around the world from a political perspective and from an economic perspective and all the things that are relevant to our faith. That's what we want to do. We want to be informed Christians like the sons of Issachar and understand the times so we know what to do. And then we can go to the Lord and He can give us guidance. We want to have our eyes wide open. And so the goal here is really just to go over the consequential stuff in just like a minute or two. And then I'm going to circle back and do some Ryan's rant on some of these because we really got to dive into this. And a lot of these really deserve an episode of their own. But we're going to see what we can do to dive right in. So welcome to the Weekly Briefing. Now, first off, obviously, we've all heard about the Iran-U.S. 2-week ceasefire. It's interesting to see what's going to be coming from that. That's happening right now with the team over there in the Middle East having talks right now. Now, news from Nigeria. We all know about the current they're at the top of the list of persecution of Christians. And so 54 Christians were killed during Holy Week. Now, that's 1,402 Christians in the first 96 days of 2026. That's insanity. And so we need to dive into that some more. We saw Pope Leo. He rebuked Trump and calls his threat for Iran unacceptable. We're not going to really get into that. I just wanted to make sure you knew about that. Times Square Easter. So Mike Signorelli, he drew thousands in an open-air Easter service in Times Square. And so that was on April 5th. Over 600 salvations reported. So that's reported from Charisma Magazine. And so calling it a revival signal. So we praise God for that. We have Hungary's election coming up. Well, today, Orban's 16-year rule faces a strong challenge. So we'll be maybe talking a little bit about that, probably on another episode. The Supreme Court, in an 8-1 ruling, 8-1, conversion therapy bans are unconstitutional. Shocker. Oh, man, I'm going to rant. We're going to rant on this one. I've done other episodes on this. We even had at the city level in Iowa, where I was at, and other cities as well, but I note that one because I've done episodes on it, where they went into these conversion therapy bans, which is absolutely insanity. And the person who was against this should have been unanimous. The person who was against this should just go ahead and step down, and I think you can probably guess who that was. I believe it was the same person who couldn't define a woman in front of Congress. Okay, so next up we have Canada removing religious exemptions from hate speech law. So we could probably talk about whether we should even have hate speech laws, and the answer is no. We shouldn't. It doesn't make any sense. It's a completely different category from like running into a theater and saying fire when there's no fire. That's not a violation of free speech to restrict that. But that's a different case. Okay, we're going to get into what's going on in Canada a little bit here. DHS is shut down this day 54, and the House returns April 14th. So just a few days. It's the longest partial government shutdown in U.S. history. So that's continuing. The Senate passed a unanimous bill on April 5th, but Congress is on Easter recess until the 14th. Markets. Well, the ceasefire has rallied the best week ever since November. And so S&P 500 surged 3% on the week, and NASDAQ up 4%, fueled by Iran ceasefire announcements. Oil crashed 13 to 16% on April 8th and rebounded from the Strait of Hormuz with his barely open. So, well, lots to get into here, but there's your headlines. I mean, there's more to talk about, but that's really the most consequential things that we need to go through. Let me know in the comments if you like this new approach, if you like this, if you think that we really need to be doing this. And so, and if this is helpful. So I want to circle back to a few of these and just get into some of what's really happening here in some of these details. But as I mentioned, in the markets, oil, energy and commodities. So oil was the headline for the commodity of the week. So that was they actually had a decline. It was the largest decline in 9 months. And so obviously we see, I think it's 20% of the world's oil is going through the Strait of Hormuz. So we see that's a big a big push for what's going on with that. So the Iran war has exposed exactly how dependent the global economy is on a single waterway. And so that's 21 miles wide. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at narrowest point, and 20% of the oil supply goes through there. And so, yeah, it's a very big deal. We could talk about the real issues and what's really going on over there, but let's stick with some of these other important headlines. So there's been plenty of unpacking for the Iran-U.S. situation, so I'm not going to go too much into that. We can do another episode if you're interested. Just let me know. But Nigeria, oh, this is just insanity. So I've done other episodes on Christian persecution, and, you know, Christians are the number one persecuted people group in the world. Number one persecuted people group in the world. Christians, followers of Jesus Christ, all right? Not some other identity that the mainstream media would like to have you believe. It's Christians. Well, what should we do? Well, Jesus said we would suffer, all right? But it doesn't mean we stand by and cheer for it and want it to happen. Of course not. But we thank God for these men and women of Christ, men and women of God who are standing for their faith no matter the cost. And I've done other episodes on this, but let's get into this actual headline. 54 people were killed on Palm Sunday. As March 29th is about, up to 54 Christians were killed in the Plateau State, and that's in Nigeria. So Easter Sunday, coordinated attacks in Benue. So 17 killed at dawn, and we had also at a Catholic church, 12 were killed and dozens were kidnapped as well, and 10 were killed in another situation as well. So that's 1,402 Christians killed and 1,800 abducted in Nigeria in the first 96 days of 2026. Unbelievable. Well, you probably aren't surprised, but ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS nightly newscasts went ahead and skipped that story. They skipped that story. Fox News Special Report did cover it, so that's good. Mainstream media, complete blackout. So the U.S. response, so the U.S. congressional legislation has been proposed, Nigeria Religious Freedom and Accountability Act of 2026. That's from Congressman Moore and Smith, Congressman Smith, the principal advisor for the Global Religious and Freedom, publicly called on Nigeria to increase protection. So this is a very big deal. Open Doors USA and also Voice of the Martyrs are two organizations that I use to follow and understand what's going on. I encourage you to partner with them. It's great. What they're doing for the persecuted church around the world. So make sure you go and check them out and give offerings to them. We really need to have them supporting the Christians around the world. All right, next up, I want to dive into the Supreme Court ban. The Supreme Court 8-1 ruling on conversion therapy ban. Now, that's obviously a big win for Christian counselors, pastors, and the like. But it's just insane that this would even be brought up in the first place. Like a conversion therapy ban. So, in other words, if somebody is struggling with something, an identity they don't want, or a desire, maybe a sexual desire, something that they don't want to have, and they go to a pastor or they go to a counselor and they say, hey, don't want these feelings, don't want to deal with this, what should I do? These states, like Colorado, tried to make it illegal for someone to give counsel to that person and do anything other than affirm them in what even if they don't want it, even if they don't want those attractions, or if they don't want to be acting on those things and they just want to get help, these people in these states want to make that illegal. Insane. So Childs versus Salazar, this is a court ruled on Colorado's conversion therapy ban violates First Amendment, 8-1 decision. Justice Gorsuch wrote the majority. So Colorado's Democratic House immediately passed a workaround bill allowing lawsuits against therapists. Unbelievable. A Republican lawmaker called it a slap in the face to SCOTUS. So there you go. They just said, oh yeah, made this unconstitutional bill. SCOTUS slapped it down 8-1, almost unanimous, except for the crazy ideology that voted the one. And they went ahead and tried to go around it. So the potential impact, so we have similar laws in between 20 and 30 states that should be shut down. So that protects Christian counselors, pastors, and parents, even parents from prosecution for simply holding biblical views in counseling settings. So, I mean, this is infuriating. I've got other episodes I'd recommend. Just go check them out. We get a little deeper into some of this, but the fact that we're even talking about this makes no sense. Like, this should have been a flash in the pan and gone, but they want to still keep pushing on it, and I'm surprised that the Democrats are still doing that. But I guess they want to keep going that route. But thankfully, we have the Supreme Court ruling, and that's going to stand. So I want to encourage you to, one of the things I said this podcast is here to do is to help encourage you and grow in your boldness, to help encourage you to be able to take a stand for Jesus Christ, stand for something. And that something is Jesus Christ. That someone, that person is Jesus Christ. It's the truth. It's what the Bible is. It's truth. And it points us to the truth. And so you got to be willing to take a stand. Now, you got to be Spirit-led about it. It doesn't mean you go gung-ho and just speak up and say all these things that is not according to what the wisdom. But we do need to be willing to step into the fire like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or into the lion's den like Daniel, or like Esther, and be willing to take a risk to speak up. To take a risk to speak up. That's what we need to be doing. That's what all these Christians in Nigeria have done. And it's just sad that we have to have this, but we need to be having a lifestyle of standing for truth regardless of the cost. I say stand for truth and come what may. That should be our philosophy. That should be the approach that we have with these things. And speaking of standing for truth, Canada, our friends to the north, Canada removes religious exemptions from hate speech law. So Parliament passed a bill stripping the existing religious exemptions from Canada's hate speech laws, which could criminalize pastoral counseling, biblical preaching on sexuality, and parent-child conversations. Yeah, getting in between the parents and the child, that is about the most unbiblical thing that the tyrannical governments can do. So this same week, Finland's Supreme Court convicted a Christian MP for a 2004 church pamphlet, which is the same legal pattern in consecutive weeks in two Western nations. So she made a pamphlet, biblical pamphlet, in 2004, and that is coming up at the Supreme Court in Finland. And now she got convicted of this hate speech, hateful Christian pamphlet. So, I guess I would say go ahead and get used to standing for truth, and go ahead and just let God be the one that you serve, the one that you want to please. It's only God. It's Jesus Christ. Because on the other side of eternity, on the other side, when we are standing before the throne, it's going to be, what did we do with what was in our hand? Were we willing to sacrifice? That's what we need to be willing to do. That's what we need to be looking at. So let's see if there's any others here. I do want to say that going back to the Nigeria persecution of these Christians, it's not just Nigeria. There's many other countries, including countries that we do business with in the U.S., namely China and India and many others. These are also top 20, at least last year they were top 20 persecuting countries of Christians. And that is, it could be from the government, it could be from rebel groups, it could be from terrorist groups, or it could be things that the government is doing, the government itself is doing, or it's just allowing to happen and look the other way. Well, we certainly have the wherewithal in the U.S. and the leverage to do something about that. And we need to do something about that. And we also have some of this garbage we have lighter persecution in America, where it's called, I hesitate to use the word persecution compared to these other things, but we do have people's lifestyles, like we mentioned in the West, that are being threatened, and their livelihoods are being threatened. And so we need to be standing strong. We need to be letting our political leaders know what we think. And we do have a midterm election year. I do want to say one other thing as I'm looking through my notes here. China did get involved with Iran. I just want to make sure I mention that so you're aware. So it says I have these strategic watch list. So there's like 12 or 18 topics that we monitor, and then when there's a meaningful update, we're sharing it on here. And one of those is a global power realignment. So we know with the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and others coming in to try and take over what the U.S. is right now. But so global power realignment is one of those strategic narratives that we want to be watching. But China, basically, they made a last-minute intervention to bring Iran to the ceasefire table. And so Pakistan is mediating the U.S.-Iran talks. Isn't that interesting? I mean, I don't know, the irony. So we got involved last year to kind of settle things down with regard to Pakistan. I think that was last year. But NATO was fractured over the Iran war. Trump publicly criticized NATO allies for not helping. And the Hungary election today, like I mentioned, could shift the EU dynamics significantly. So, yeah, it's pretty shocking that, even I think it was Spain and one other country, I think, wouldn't even let the U.S. use their bases. We say you can't use our airspace. This isn't our war. We're not involved. And it's kind of like, Okay, well, forget about all those other things, in the last 50, 70 years where we were really literally involved in things that we shouldn't have been involved in, or that was their war. But wow, a lot happened in the last 7 days. Let me know what you think of this. Is this helpful for you? Let me know what I missed in the comments. And if you're on the audio of this, just send me get the link in the show notes, and you could send me a text message there in the link in the show notes, and let me know what you think. Well, man, there's a lot more that we can get into and unpack, but I think that's enough for today. I hope this was a blessing for you, and I hope you're having a great weekend. God bless, and we'll see you in the next episode.